this tutorial we're going to be learning how to crochet the waffle stitch. Start by making a slip knot using your preferred method and then make a starting chain that is a multiple of 3. It can be any length you like as long as it is a multiple of 3. I'm going to go for 18 for this tutorial. Once you've made your starting chain, our first row is actually a setup row that is different from all of the future rows of this stitch. So let's work that setup row together. So skip the first 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and then work a US double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. So I'm working my double crochet in that chain there. Now those 3 chains that we skipped, they count as your first double crochet stitch for this row. To finish off the setup row, work 1 double crochet in each chain across until you reach the end of the chain, and I'll meet you there. Once you reach the end of your row, you should have a stitch count that is a multiple of 3 plus 1, and that plus 1 will be that starting chain here that we're counting as a double crochet. We're now ready to start row 1 of the waffle stitch pattern. So start this row with a chain of 3. This counts as our first double crochet stitch, then turn your work over. Because we made that starting chain that counts as our first double crochet, we're going to skip this first stitch, and then we're going to do something called a front post double crochet around the next 2 stitches. So if you've not worked a front post stitch before, I'll show you how to do it. It's exactly the same as a normal double crochet, we just put our hook in a different place. We put our hook around the post of the stitch. So if I bring this up to the camera here, so here is the back of a double crochet stitch. Usually when we make a stitch, we go into this space here underneath both of the loops at the top of the stitch to make the stitch. To work a front post stitch, we work around the post from the front. So I'm yarned over here ready to make my double crochet, and I'm going to put my hook into the space between the first and the second stitch here. So I'm putting my hook in this space just here, just like that, and then I'm going to come up from back to front between the second and the third stitches here, that little space there between the stitches. So if you can see, my hook has kind of gone around the post of the stitch from the front. Then we work our double crochet as normal, so yarn over, pull up a loop to the back and then to the front of your crochet. We now have 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. That is our first front post double crochet, and we're going to work another one together. So yarn over, put your hook into the space between the stitch we just worked and the next stitch here, so in that space there, just there. Then bring up your hook the other side of that stitch, working around the post of the stitch. Yarn over and pull up a loop around the post of the stitch to the front of the crochet, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that is our first 2 front post double crochets done. Next, work a normal double crochet into the next stitch. So we're not going around the post of this stitch, we're going into the normal place just there underneath both of the loops at the top of the stitch, just to make a normal double crochet. And then we're going to repeat these 3 stitches across, so working a front post double crochet around the post of the next stitch, and the same again, so another front post double crochet around the next stitch, and then a normal double crochet. And you're going to repeat these 3 stitches all the way across to the end of the row, working 2 front post stitches and then a normal double crochet. I'll meet you at the end of the row and I'll show you what we're doing for the second row of this stitch pattern. Here I am at the end of row 1, and I've just done 2 front post stitches, and then my final stitch is into the top of our starting chain that we're counting as a double crochet from the setup row, so making a double crochet in the top of that starting chain there. So that's the first row of this stitch done, and now we're ready to move on to the second row. So to start the second row, make a chain of 3, this counts as your first double crochet, and then turn your work over. So with this stitch pattern we have edge stitches, and if you've watched some of my previous stitch tutorials this is quite common. So the first and last stitch of every row, whether it is row 1 or row 2, because this is a 2-row repeat, we're going to be repeating over and over again. So we always have a double crochet either side of sort of the rest of the stitches, the front post stitches. So that first chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, so that edge stitch, and then our last double crochet is an edge stitch as well. So let's move on to the stitch repeat for row 2. So in row 1 we did 2 front post double crochets and then a normal double crochet. We're going to kind of reverse that for row 2. So we're going to do 2 normal double crochets and then a front post double crochet. So I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to skip this first stitch because we've made our chain, that's our first double crochet coming from that first stitch. Then work a double crochet into each of the next 2 stitches. Then work a front post double crochet around the next stitch. So that stitch there, it's easy to see which stitch we're doing this around because it kind of pops to the front of the work because of the texture of the previous row. So I'm doing a front post double crochet around that stitch, and then we're going to repeat this across, so 2 normal double crochets and then a front post double crochet all the way until the end of the row, and then I'll meet you back here to do our edge stitch. This is what your work should look like when you're almost at the end of row 2 of the stitch pattern, and you can see we've got these front post stitches and then 2 normal double crochets. I've left my final stitch unworked, that's the starting chain from the previous row, and into the top of that starting chain we're not going to be doing a front post stitch like we've been doing previously, we just do a normal double crochet because like I said we have these edge stitches. The first and last stitches, no matter what row you're on, are always normal double crochets. And that's basically how you crochet waffle stitch. You repeat rows 1 and row 2 over and over and over again until you end up with this beautiful textured grid pattern that looks just like a waffle. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and if you'd like to learn some more stitches, some are great for beginners, I'll pop up my playlist here. I'll see you again in next week's tutorial.